All right. So Florida Qualified Supervision Renewal. Let's start with what are your questions, topics, burning issues, something that you want to be sure we talk about. What is it that you want to be sure we cover in the next couple of hours? Don't talk all at once. Yes, Janet.
For me, time management. One of the things, I'm actually taking a break after this last group because I struggled with maintaining good focus on my own caseload while providing the required supervision to my interns, because we were all in the same office. So, I wanted to be available when they needed me, but I really struggle with balancing the two mindsets, because for me, they're two very different jobs. And usually when I'm in my when I'm in my counseling mode, it's a difficult process for me to shift out of to get into supervisor mode and then back again. And so I don't know if that's maybe a personal challenge for me, or if there are other supervisors who've had that experience and can kind of share how they have managed that.
Yeah, kind of a code switching issue. I'm in this mind and then I got to be in this mind. And okay, yes. Great. All right. Definitely we can address that. What else, folks?
And what about, I have an intern right now working with undocumented minors at a facility, and the question came up of having to share therapy notes with government personnel. So we read ACA's response to that and a briefing response to that from the White House, because I was having concerns of whether I should be supervising her. She's sort of breaking confidentiality, or she has to break confidentiality. So we went down this rabbit hole. And so I wanted to know if you had any information on that.
Yeah. Wow. So it's stuff that you're supervising her and she wants to, so you're trying to advise her on what she can and cannot share from her work. Is that what we're talking about?
Right. So she's working for an agency that works with the government for undocumented, who are housing undocumented minors. And we've seen on the news where we've had to share release confidentiality to government entities with regard to this in terms of therapy notes. And that's obvious conflict with our ethics, our code of ethics, with all of our code of ethics. So I wondered what AMFT had to say about it. So we read ACA's letter on it in response to it, but I didn't see anything regarding AMFT or anything like that. So maybe this is a conversation for another time, but I was concerned, like, should I be supervising this person if she's then having to divulge confidential, go against our ethics? And so we went down the road and we read a bunch of things, and we're not, but I wondered what you thought about that.
Yeah. Okay. And I think, while on the one hand, this sounds very specific, I think certainly all of us have or could have people that we supervise that are being asked to share information and are not sure about that, that work in agencies perhaps. So yeah, we could do that. All right, Larry, would you mind picking up? I'm gonna go silent for a second. I have another person who's trying to get in.
Okay. Yeah. So what else from anyone else? What other questions, concerns? Yes, Stacey.
I think it's important to talk about private practice and telehealth. There are so many registered interns out there that think that they can do telehealth and private practice and from their houses. And unless they have a licensed person in their house, which many of them do not, most of them do not, some of them do actually, then they should not be doing telehealth from their house. And I just, it's a constant, I think, discussion and battle that I'm hearing throughout the
Mhm.
community.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a really good question. Thank you, Stacey.
To build on that, Stacy, I would think a lot of the issues with interns going into private practice, which leads me to, if anybody has, if we can cover that, any good ideas on how to get rid of an intern. Because I'm not putting up with how she went into private practice and her documentation and even her process of doing therapy is not evident. And so based on all of this, it's like, how can I graciously get rid of her without hanging her up too badly?
Okay. So how do I resign? And what are
Actually, I'm very clear. How do I fire her? I don't
How
want
do
to
you
resign. I
fire
want to
her?
fire her.
I'm reframing it, just reframe.
And I appreciate that, Larry.
So, yeah, so how do I fire somebody as an intern? And the follow-up would be, how do you let the board know that you're no longer, how do you let the 491 board know that you're no longer the supervisor of record too? Yeah, that's
I figured
something.
just like becoming the supervisor, I'd send them a letter and an email and show that I have provided her with this intern with a verification of experience form. Plus, it's going to be one where I'm going to have to check off that nasty box the first time ever. This intern does not meet standards.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to do that. I agree, Michael.
Yeah.
I have a
Okay.
question.
Chris?
You also have
So-
to document that, right? You have to document why this person doesn't meet standards. Like
Correct.
a
You have to explain that on
detailed letter. Mhm.
the experience form.
Sure.
Right.
That made me think of something that I struggle with, supervising so many students, and the vast majority of the students that come to FSU for the program have no intention on staying in Florida, but they become a registered intern here. And so I'm their supervisor while they're here in the program. Something I've struggled with is we have such high turnover, right? Every year we have students graduating and new students coming. So I have tried to reach out to the board unsuccessfully. So I don't know what I'm doing wrong on my part, to find out who are all of the students under my name that I'm supervising.
Right.
I need to clean them out because I know many of them have moved and they just leave. There's no, hey, let's submit this final paperwork. They just kind of graduate and they're gone. And I've just had a hard time keeping up with all of that. So if anyone has.
Yeah, that's a good question, because I know back when they just changed the law a few years ago and placed the time limit, they actually sent out to all of us, here's the people under your name. And I was astounded because it was people who had long been licensed. They didn't change it, and so I was like, holy cow. And
but I know there's also a limit. You can only have 25 supervisees, right?
Yes.
So
yeah.
I don't know how the board hasn't contacted me and said, what's going on? Because you can't possibly be seeing all of these people. So there's got to be people under my license that I am no longer supervising. I just need to clean it up.
Well, I can answer that one quickly. If you send an email to the board, they will send back to you the list of who is still listed in your name. I do that probably about once a year, maybe not that often because I keep closer track than that. But yeah, I periodically will send and ask for that list. And then I'll look through it, and then I will copy and paste the names that I am not supervising and send that back to them. And then they'll remove that from my list. So yeah,
So-
I do that sort of cleanup every couple of years.
Mhm.
Do you send it using the MQA services email analytics?
Yes, I do.
address? Okay.
Yes, I do. Yeah. 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 So that is a way to keep track of that. Yeah. Adita, is your hand up?
Yes, I was gonna go piggyback back on the telehealth issue, but within agencies. So private practice, telehealth agency, you know, they're all registered interns doing it from home. So just kind of wanted to pick everybody's brain about that, how they feel about it.
Mhm. That's a good point. These are all good questions. Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah,
All
and I know
right.
Annalyn has some updates on that we will get into in updating the law. But yeah, it changed when the pandemic, officially the ending happened and all the allowances that were happening changed. So,
Okay. All right. Well, Larry, I've only got a couple. You've got some because I was distracted. I want to welcome Dr. Tracy Oliver. Good afternoon. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Yes. Would you mind telling us your context? Are you in private practice, academia, agency, and who are you supervising?
I'm supervising a lot of people.
I mean,
I-
there's students, registered
I
interns.
Got you. Okay. Students and registered interns. I am in private practice and in academia at NCU. And what was your other question? I apologize. I was at the other link, so I was waiting to get in, so I'm a little thrown off. So please explain.
No worries. Where are you geographically?
Florida, South Florida,
All of us are Florida. What part of Florida?
South Florida. Do you need my
Okay.
specific city?
I
Pembroke
mean,
Pines?
we have Miami, we have Fort Lauderdale, we have
I'm in Pembroke Pines, which is between Miami and Fort Lauderdale.
oh, okay. Yeah, sure. Pembroke Pines. Sure. We've got some people who are in Plantation. I'm in North Lauderdale. So, yep. You're among hometown folks here. All right.
I'm
Very
in
good.
Cooper City, right by you.
There you
Yeah.
go. There you go. All righty.
I see some familiar
Very good. Thank you. And Catherine McKay, how are you this evening or afternoon? I guess it's still afternoon.
Thanks for having me. Yes, I too was on the Eventbrite one, so I got a little confused, so sorry about that. I'm in St. Pete, Florida, private practice, and was supervising registered mental health intern and well as students, but now mostly people who are already licensed.
Okay, so you do mostly consultation. Okay.
Correct.
Okay, great. That's nice. We have the whole life cycle here. So that's wonderful.
I wanted to tag in on what Charmaine was talking about. I'm the issue you brought up, Charmaine. I'm curious about that issue, so I'm glad you brought that up. But I'm also curious about issues around clients who are transitioning, abortion laws. This has
Yes.
become really big for my interns who don't work in my office, do some agency work, and how to either document or not document, because some of these things are being revealed. So the issues around any type of stuff to your body that could be problematic with some of the laws. It's not problematic. I want to be clear, like they're fine with that. They're doing this from my perspective, but the laws and how to report or not report, it's been tricky of late. So
Protect our
just
clients.
putting that out there.
Yes. So helping supervisees navigate that with their clients. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right.
Very good. Very good. All righty. Well, so this is not the only time we can answer questions, but let's get on with some of the required topics that we must cover. I sent to you a copy of the statute so that you know the content that we're supposed to cover. So one of the first things is about changes to Florida law and ethical and legal issues for us as supervisors. including teletherapy and documentation of supervisory sessions. So those are the areas. So some of you may know that a new rule got put into place that within 7 days of ending with a registered intern, we must submit the verification form. And it doesn't say that the person has to be paid up. It doesn't mean that they have to be finished. It's just that if it's finished, then we have to turn in the documentation.
We have to submit that to the board?
Yes, you have to submit that to the board. Exactly. And that's typically how I do it, is fill it out and then scan it. And I usually also mail the hard copy to the learner. Now this gets a little fuzzy. I do see you, Irma. This gets a little bit fuzzy when an intern just sort of disappears. And I have that situation right now where I have let a couple of people go because they've disappeared, and I've just told the state that I'm no longer supervising them. But then in preparing for this, I thought, gee, I should send them the form for the 7 hours or 3 hours that they did with me to be in compliance with the rule, assuming I can find them. And that is an issue there. But the reverse is also true. I'm like Larry, I have a couple of people who need to finish their hours with me, or chose to finish them with me, though they've done 60, 70 hours with someone else, but the supervisor has disappeared. And they did not get that documentation from the supervisor. And I've actually had them go through the board to hunt down the supervisor to get them to do the form. Otherwise, they have to do all 100 hours of supervision. So, so those are the kinds of issues that come up. Yes?
There is an R there, and interns can request to attend a board meeting in person. And if they have documentation that they have paid for intern supervision, they can present documentation to the board in person. Now, this is the actual board, not to just the staff. And I have seen occasions when supervisors have died or disappeared, when the board actually enough documentation to show that they had been doing so in good faith. However, there's certainly no guarantee of that.
Well, and knowing these stories of students and interns that had no documentation, I created a form and sent it to them and said, if you want, this is long enough ago that I was still meeting with people in person. I said, if you want to bring this form, and I will sign it to document that we have met. Not one person chose to do this. I think it's their responsibility, not mine, to do this. I used to send a letter once a year at the end of the year saying, as of this date, you have this many hours, as a way to document that. But that's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And if you have a lot of people, like I do, that was a pain. So, but I think it's an appropriate thing for us to discuss with interns. But what I do is I have records. I regularly tell them that if ever I got hit by a bus, to have them ask for my planner books, because I have it written in them, their names and how many hours. I have that documented. So they got to find these books to get that documentation. Stace, and then I'm sorry, Irma, and then Stacy.
I'd like to know the 7 days. Is that 7 business days or 7 calendar days?
I don't think it may say it exactly. I don't know. I think the spirit of it is get it done. Get it done. Okay. Get it done sooner rather than later. Yeah. Okay. Stace?
I have a log that I do with my supervisees, and when we get to the bottom of a page, I say, take a picture of it. That way, if the office gets burned down, I die on vacation, whatever, you have something, and because I sign off on each thing. If you want to take a picture of it every time, take or photocopy of it or whatever, but That's how I do it, so that they always have it.
And I would happily do that if they asked me to. But I very much make it their responsibility. If
Yeah.
they want that documentation, then they need to ask me for it. And I've had some who will like send me a spreadsheet of
Yeah.
what they're doing. And what I'll do is I will print off the last page and hard sign it and send it back to them. So if they go to the effort to do that, I'll be happy to comply. But I'm not going to, just like with clients, I'm not going to work harder than they are as far as that's concerned. Charmaine.
Well, I text them every once in a while. This is as of today, this is what you have. But I also have, for you and Michael's recommendation at some point, a professional will that notes someone specifically who they can contact in case of my demise or anything incapacitated or something like that, that they can contact for that information.
Yeah, that's great. Do you remind me, another thing that interns will do is when they pay me through Venmo or Zelle or whatever, they'll put in for supervision hours, you know, however many hours that they've done at that point. And then I will respond back, you know, correct or something like that. So that's another way for them to do that. Larry, you said, I see your question.
Carrie had a question. I just wanted to know in the chat that I saw it, wrote it down.
Good.
Add it
Good,
to our
good.
list.
Yeah, no, and I don't think it's too broad. I think it's a good question. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah. Yeah, so documentation of supervisory sessions. There's a couple of board members on the 491 board has been desperately trying to require that we keep some sort of required notes. I don't know how in the world anyone would track that. So it always gets voted down, but there probably needs to be some way that we document that so that it can be found. But we are required to provide that verification within a week or as quickly to document that they've done certain hours. All right. I think it's also useful for us to clarify, because someone asked about this, is to clarify who can, what can registered interns do in private practice and what can they not do? So there is a statute, not a rule, a statute that says that in a private practice, a registered intern must have a license on site. Doesn't have to be the supervisor, but it has to have a licensed person on site. And it can't be a licensed nurse or a massage therapist. It has to be under 491 or 490 or whatever it is for psychiatry. So any of those will work. I don't think an advanced practice RN, an APRN, I don't think that counts. Even though they can practice and they can actually take the MFT license, I don't think they are on that list. Larry, do you know other?
I think if they're a psychiatric nurse practitioner,
they could be the license on site. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't think they can supervise, but I think so. Maybe they could. All right. So then in other parts of the statutes, it lists all the places that a master's level person can practice without a license. So government, not-for-profit, community mental health. Now, I'd like to point something out that nobody pays attention to, but is that it says salaried. So all of these people who are working without a license in community nonprofit mental health who are not salaried are not following the law because they have to be salaried. The big question is, what is private practice? Because a lot of people believe that I'm not a private practice. I'm a huge agency. I just happen to be for profit. But because the whereas you can practice without a license says not for profit or government, it has created great fuzziness. Tremendous fuzziness, particularly in March of 2020, when they said that registered interns can count telehealth towards their hours. Now, the board seemed to be under some impression that registered interns weren't doing telehealth. Of course, they were deluded. Of course, they were doing telehealth. They just couldn't count it according to the rule. Now they can count it. In fact, they could do 100% of their 1,500 hours telehealth, so long as they're following the rule, which is that for community mental health, not for profit, they can do it from home. But if they're working for a private practice, which has not been defined, they have to be on site where there is a license, but they can still do telehealth. They just have to be on site with a license. So I've had tons of interns say, I just got a job at this agency and they're letting me do telehealth from home. And I said, let's look them up on Sunbiz, because if they are not listed as not for profit, I will not supervise you for those hours. Because as far as I'm concerned, that's not following the law. Now, y'all can do what you want, but that's the hard line I make. Until the board defines private practice in a way that is clear. And I know that, do I know the specific statute? I can't tell you chapter and verse, but I can hunt it down for you, Dr. Tracy. Yeah. But it's been on the books for a very, very, very long time, very long time. So until they redefine it, or the other possibility is FFTA and FIN and AMFT's Florida family team is looking to introduce legislation that will change that law so that instead of saying a supervisor on site, it will say a supervisor is available, which is exactly how it is in not-for-profit, that the supervisor is supposed to be available. So one or two things happen, a clear definition, or we change the statute. So that's where we are with that. Now, as supervisors and as private practitioners, I have told you my interpretation of the law. And if you want the board's interpretation of the law, there's an entire procedure by which you send in a petition and then they have to address it at the next board meeting. But the question of definition of private practice has been presented and talked about quite a bit, and the board has still not gotten around to defining it. I know they've been grappling it since January and have not come to any sort of conclusions about that. Any thoughts that y'all have about that, since the vast majority of you are in private practice? What are your
thoughts?
Yes, Charmaine, give me your thoughts.
So I have an intern right now who's working in a hybrid practice, private practice and community mental health agency. So it's said that I'm in the same similar boat. I'm going to look at Sunbiz to see if this practice is a nonprofit, but I spoke with the supervisor and they assured me that they were a part of that nonprofit okayed space. This intern is seeing clients in her household, and she's also billing private insurance.
Okay, well, that's illegal.
Right.
Wow.
Right.
Allow me to interrupt. So that's my understanding, Annalyn. Is there anyone among us who has heard differently, that interns can somehow bill?
Well, and Charmaine is saying a student.
Oh, excuse me, not a student, it's a postmaster, sorry.
Postmaster's registered intern.
Language.
Yes.
Yeah, registered intern,
Yeah.
sorry.
Michael, I have encountered a couple of registered interns who said, oh yes, I see that. And my response has been,
Show me.
get me a copy of the documentation from the insurance company that says it.
Right.
And then I will allow you to count those hours.
So
No one has sent it to me yet.
a couple of things changed during COVID, and Cigna and Aetna allowed for, if, for instance, in private practice, I took Cigna and Aetna, my registered interns here could take Cigna and Aetna under my license. That changed in 2020.
Yeah.
Did it change back,
just-
Stacey?
No, it is
It's
still
still
like
there.
that.
It's
It's
still
still
there.
it's still there. So it's just those two.
Cigna and
Stacy,
Aetna.
I would love for you to to send to me a copy
Me too.
of where it says it.
You have to email them, and then they will email you back. There is no document. So specifically with Cigna, when I had heard about this, because a registered intern received an email from Cigna saying, hey, you can bill as a registered intern. They forwarded the email to me. I reached out to the rep that does the contracting for the Southeast area, or whatever they're recognized as, and then that person responded saying yes. And then I asked them where's the language. They're like, there's no language. We are doing this because of COVID. And every time I have to renew my agreement, I'm like, all right, just checking that still applies. And as of March of this last year, when I checked in, they said it was still applying.
But you have that in writing, Dr. Tracy?
I do by email. It's an email.
Okay, so you have an email that states this. Okay, well,
so there's not a link that I can send anybody to say, here's where it's at. And before COVID, Optum used to do it too, but they stopped, I guess, when COVID started. So
that seems kind of backwards, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah.
And then so Cerebral allows registered interns to do billing through insurance and all the other stuff as well.
The Wild West.
Yes. What would you say?
I said, this is the Wild Wild West.
So Cerebral allows it. And from what I heard, what's the other big one? I can't think of them right now. Just like Cerebral, but they started earlier. I can't think of it right now. BetterHelp. BetterHelp was supposedly in the process of doing it. Cerebral is not accepting any more Florida registered interns because they of course everybody found out and then they applied. But I think BetterHelp was in the process at least a few months ago trying to allow that as well, because they have bigger contracts with these companies, these insurance companies, so they can negotiate a little bit more, I guess, when they say, hey, we have 1,000 registered interns that we can provide services, So I have a couple of registered interns through Cerebral. That's the only reason why I know. And I actually met with the supervisor to confirm, the supervisor that's through Cerebral. I wanted to confirm, like, hey, how are you guys able to do this? And they confirmed. I'll look for the same email.
That would be great. That'd be great, because I'm afraid that people I'm not sure that every private practitioner is as thorough in checking that all out as you have, Dr. Tracy. Yes, Larry.
Yeah, I only do one insurance company for my own private practice, so I'm not familiar with all of them. But I know even during COVID, as a provider, if I logged into their website and looked at the latest rules that they had for what counted, because at one point they said, Blue Cross said, you don't have to take a copay. We'll cover the copay for telehealth for the client during the pandemic. So I know that they did have things on the website as a provider you can look at and see. Now, how well they do in grading that, keeping it up to date, I don't know. But I also wanted to say, in reference to the questions about the private practice and the telehealth, and is it a for-profit or not? I think a lot of the people who come from the master's internship get confused, because when they're in a master's program, doesn't have anything to do with the regulatory board of Florida or any other state. That's under accreditation guidelines. And so I think that's something to keep in mind with our interns, is to let them know things may have changed, and it's your responsibility to know what's different and what's not different, because during, in the beginning of telehealth, they couldn't do it.
He's got little connectivity difficulties there from Chicago.
Sorry. Very quickly, they allowed temporarily, and now with the 12.5, co-FT standards, they're allowing all hours can be by virtual for counting towards their master's degree.
And I
So
could see why
think
they'd be
that's where
confused. I
some
just
of
did a,
them get
yeah, I just did a
confused.
year's internship. Why can't I do it post? And yeah, they are not up on the Florida laws in regards to that. So as supervisors, you need to know it, because the private practitioner who is not a supervisor, but is allowing the registered intern to work in their practice, may not be on top of the law. So so that's where we really are become the guardians of that information. So
Yeah, most of them don't take the 8-hour laws and rules that they're required to take until they pass the test, right? So they may have been a registered intern for up to 5 years now and never looked at laws
right.
and rules.
That's something else you as supervisors can require, right, Michael? Is require that your interns take the laws and rules within the first 6 months of your supervising them, so that they are practicing under that. It inevitably happens that when Michael and I teach the laws and rules, that several people will say, oh my God, my agency has been doing this illegally.
Yeah.
Inevitably it happens. Yes, Michael.
My concern, and it's nice to hear that there actually really are, as we have heard, insurance companies actually saying interns can bill, but I'm still leery in providing the evidence that that's the case with others. Now that you said Aetna and Cigna, I can keep an eye out for that. But Blue Cross and Humana and all these others, before even Cigna or Aetna allowed them during the COVID, the point is, we've heard many situations where in private practice, the fully licensed person will bill under their insurance for the intern's work totally illegally.
Mhm.
So and the intern, when I'm trying to clarify and shush this out and figure out what's going on, they're not catching on. And it's like, no, you need to show me,
So
Yeah.
yeah, in the chat, Tracy just put the wording there, which is somewhat enlightening, because it is a billing under the supervisor's license. So the supervisor is signing off on the intern doing it. I think
But
that's
the
kind of
intern's name
dangerous.
the intern's name is not listed. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
that
Wow.
sounds just like the old scams that they were doing before.
Yeah. I think that's dangerous for your own license, for your own life.
As a
for
supervisor, yeah.
sure.
I think if you're supervising their work and they're doing this, I think that you could be putting yourself into some risk there.
Well, and this
But
is
again,
just-
it's up to you.
If they're just a landlord and not the supervisor, what's the connection for the billing?
Yeah. Very much.
Yeah.
So, so these are things as supervisors we need to be looking out for with what registered interns are doing. Stacy, I'm glad to know that not everybody has been lying to me all this time, but I'm still looking for some sort of documentation that will really assure me, because in our world, if it ain't writ, it isn't real, and I would be looking for that. And yeah, I think that opens the door, as Larry's saying, to too much opportunity for fraud.
Yeah.
I've had interns. I was invited to a breakfast once, and a bunch of interns were seeking my consult. I was not supervising them, and they said that they routinely will sign blank insurance forms that are then used by the person that owned the practice, and there was no license on site for this practice. And I said, I suggest that you call all of your clients and terminate them immediately and leave that practice today. And then I suggest that you file a grievance with the board. And then I called Larry, and Larry said, now that you, Annalyn, should file a grievance with the board. And I was like, I don't want to. So they did leave. They did all leave.
I've heard you cry before.
Yes. They did, well, they left, and I later looked and found it that there were licensed on site. So there that. Can registered have their own private practice without a license on site? Nope, they sure can't, Catherine. They can have their own practice. They can have their own practice. They can have their own LLC or whatever. Nowhere in the statutes is to say they can't have their own business. They just simply cannot be providing service without a licensed person on site. And whenever I have an intern saying that they want to do this, I'm like, how are you documenting who the license was on site for every single hour that you were providing service? This is what I want to know.
Ooh, that's even more sticky. That's stickier than I am. Ooh.
I just want to know. I just want to say, if they bring you to court and they say, and Mr. Rhodes, who was the license on site on January 15th at 3 p.m. when you saw this client, would you know? Would you have that documented anywhere?
I simply do it in my contract where if they want to go into private practice, I have the license sign the statement that I will be there. But I don't.
Well, and that is another piece that changed. Yeah, that was another piece that changed. In order for any registered intern to count telehealth hours in the contract you have with them, there must be a clause about telehealth and that they will have someone available to them. So that was true across the board, but that was available, not on site. So that clause went into my contract, and then I sent it out to everybody. Yes, Irma.
So I heard throughout the years that what some of the registered interns are doing is that their supervisor is in the same building. So they have their own practice. Their supervisor is like maybe next door in their own practice. And so that's how they're getting around the on-site. So
Right.
I just wanted to sort of get a little bit of clarity.
Yeah. I too agree that that's really hinky, and I can see Stacy already saying, no,
Right.
this is not okay. I've had people say, oh yeah, there's another license, 3 floors up and on the other end of the building.
Right.
I'm like, where's the contract? Where's the contract that they know that they're gonna be the person on site if something goes south? Larry.
Yeah, I've heard at board meetings, I've heard board members talk about this very issue, and their intent is breathing the same air. You can't breathe the same air if you're on the 2nd floor and they're on the 10th floor. So that's the intent of it. I think, though, that they can't always enforce what they wish they could enforce, And so at the very least, I think you have to have that contract that Michael's talking about, that this licensed person, even if it's not your supervisor, this licensed person, you have an agreement with that person that if you're practicing and they're next door, that they understand that you are covering for them in whatever the language.
I mean, I know, Stacy, you've made the decision that no one practices in your offices unless you're the supervisor. You've made that a rule, right?
I did. I changed that during COVID, and if you want to be a registered intern in private practice in my office, I am going to be your supervisor. You can have another supervisor as well, but I am going to be your supervisor too. And that because I'm taking on that liability, and I'm not going to put another person's license in jeopardy.
Yeah. So these are all things that, as you work with registered interns who are working in a private practice context, however you've decided to define it, and I have a dog that can't decide which side of the screen to be on, sorry, then this is something you have to think through and talk through with your registered interns. Obviously, the easiest thing is if they work for community mental health. those are the easy ones. And then it's you don't have to worry about all of this other stuff, and they can work from home and all of that. I'd say a second best is if you personally know or get to know the practice owner where your people are doing their work. That would be another way to make sure that I've got a collegial relationship with them, so that I know what they're doing. I can contact them if the intern says something that sounds kind of hinky to me, that sort of thing. So these are all things that you need to be aware of. And I can certainly find some of those statutes and send it back to you if that's something that would be helpful. And I would recommend either not waiting for me to go and go find them, because this is the stuff that is controlling your practice as a supervisor. Just a couple of other things to go over. You all read the ethical and boundaries information that we sent out. I thought it was very interesting, because when it was written, 2017, we did not have all the pandemic telehealth kinds of things going on. And so what sorts of things do you as a supervisor require of your registered interns if they are doing telehealth? What are your requirements around that? Yes,
this
Stace.
will answer.
Oh, sorry, Larry.
And Lynn, this will answer the question that was asked earlier about what do they most likely get in trouble for as interns with the board. It is boundary issues.
Boundary issues of all sorts of types. Yes. Yes. Yeah. So Stacy, what do you require of your folks?
They have to do telehealth here in the office. They have to book a room. They have to make sure that there is a licensed person here, whether it's me or another licensed person. They have a form, that they need to fill out. They need to know, their client's address, if that's where they are, where their location is, who else is in the house with them, all sorts of things I have listed. And they have to know how to get in touch with me if because if I'm not on site, how, where am I? How can you be in touch with me? And if I'm out of the country, then, Natalie is me.
Who is the next person, right?
Yeah.
How far away do you allow your people to have clients? Like, I know you're in the Fort Lauderdale area. Would you let them have clients in Orlando, Tampa, Jacksonville, Gainesville, Pensacola? Would you let them do that?
Yes, if it's not a,
but they have to answer all those questions.
They have to answer all those questions, and we have to talk about if that case is appropriate for telehealth, in terms of, is there active suicidality or, things like that? Is this, all those sorts of things. We have to talk about whether the case is appropriate for telehealth.
Yeah, we've had whole conversations about the fact that if your case is going south and you dial 911, you're going to get local. You're not going to get where they are if they're in some other part of the state. And so they have to think really carefully about having that information about how would they call in child abuse or any of the rest of it. Yes.
They need to know the local, we've talked about this. They have to know the local police, the local resources for that area. That's one of the checklist items.
Awesome.
It's a hassle as a clinician, let alone an intern, to go and look this stuff up, print it off and put it in the file so you're ready for your distance client.
Yeah. They have to put it in the file. Absolutely.
Yeah.
My interns have to supply me with a certified training certificate saying that they were trained for telehealth.
I like that.
Oh, I like that, Charmaine.
I like that.
Happily, if you go to the Florida Interest Network YouTube channel, there is a 3-hour telehealth, and Richard Long is going to be providing another 3-hour telehealth in, I think, December is when, either December or January. I don't exactly remember. So yes, so we'll be offering that, but there is one that is available on YouTube right now. Yeah.
We
Awesome.
require it at the university for the students before they start the actual practicum, that they have to have the telehealth training.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and they
Yeah,
have to print a certificate and we have to put it in their file.
Larry.
Unlike other states, there's not a certificate that Florida requires for telehealth training. It just says you have to take training and be competent. So in some states, it's like 30 hours or 10 hours and certification. In Florida, it just says simply be trained. So if they do the, what Annalyn is talking about, the Florida Interest Network, the 3-hour recording, which is free, I think, correct, Annalyn?
Yep, it's free.
And they document that they took it, then that meets the requirements for training. The one thing with telehealth I wanted to mention and letting interns be aware of is that it's real easy to have people come and become involved who are not the client. And what they may not recognize that we need to inform them of is anybody that comes to the session has to sign an informed consent. And if it's a minor, the minor's parents need to sign informed consent. So if Johnny shows up as a friend and the client says, oh, Johnny's here and he's going to hang out while we're talking, then they have to know, wait, no, I don't have informed consent for that patient or that person to be included. So those are the kinds of things that I think interns just may not think of that we can educate them on.
Also, I have an in case of emergency protocol, Larry, that the practitioner, not a practitioner, but the patients or the clients sign. And we've had situations where we've had to use the in case of emergency over a therapy agreement because we had to fulfill a Baker Act or something like that to break confidentiality, do that. So in those cases, we don't have one, but we have the protocol to use the in case of emergency signatures permission.
Right. And so if you are supervising someone who is not in your practice, then that's a conversation you have with them to make sure that they're doing it in their practice or in their agency or wherever it is. And that's where having relationships with the workplaces can be a big benefit to us as supervisors. Yeah.
I don't know if this was a Florida requirement or I can't remember right now, or if it was an insurance requirement. I think it was a Florida requirement that Cerebral ended up putting out a document that every person that my supervisees see, they have to agree to, or they have to acknowledge that I'm the supervisor. So they have the informed consent that this is a registered intern, they are under supervision for licensure. Here's a supervisor, it has my contact information. And then the client signs it, the supervisee signs it, and then I sign it. And it's part of the client's file for Cerebral. And then I keep a copy for myself as well. And I think that's helpful, that especially when you are working with registered interns, even if it's outside of insurance, that there's some documentation that the client understands that this person is under supervision, they're not fully licensed. So I think that a lot of times people just assume that if they're seeing a therapist, that the person's licensed, even if they are being seen through a separate supervisor. So
yeah.
Yep. In California, one of the requirements to even get into their student practicum is to draft that notification that they're going to use with each of their clients. Yeah. Any other questions or thoughts about telehealth or legal ethical issues? I mean, we could do an entire workshop on just ethical issues, and boundary issues. Yes, Larry.
So somebody had asked, let's see, was it Renee or someone had asked about the changes to Florida law recently about abortion notification transitioning your body, things like that, and that being a notice that we have to have. And I know in the past, what Florida did was we got AAMFT, we got the legal department to draft an opinion. Like in the past, you remember years ago, it said that we could not ask clients any questions about if they owned a gun or had a gun for a little while until that was declared unconstitutional, thank goodness. And they had an exorbitant financial penalty if you, as a mental health as a health professional, not just mental health, but health professional, were to ask that question of your client and it became known. So on this more recent thing, I don't think that we have a legal opinion that I know of. That would be something that perhaps the Florida Interest Network can ask AAMFT to give one. But I don't know if anybody else knows or has seen a legal opinion on that, answer that question.
This sounds similar to the whole situation, how to document a client that says they have HIV and you couldn't put that in the record.
Yeah.
You know, so these issues now are becoming legislative footballs, hotcakes. And how do we protect our client if their notes were ever released, releasing authorized release, or the state wants to start stepping in?
Here's where the privileged communication comes in, and personal issues were discussed in the therapy session, and I don't have to go into details. I don't have to tell the government that this client is thinking about terminating a pregnancy. I never use the A word because it's so inflammatory. It's tough. It's terminating a pregnancy.
Right.
But I'm not going to document that. That's a conversation I'm having in the therapy session.
So as a supervisor, it sounds like these are kinds of things that you would talk about with your trainees as to how to document in a way that maintains the client's privacy, and because unlike attorneys and priests, we cannot claim privilege. Only the client can, and that can be superseded by a court. Whereas priests and lawyers cannot be superseded by the court. So we do need to write our notes, and we have to train our supervisees to write their notes with that in mind. Yeah. I can only be hopeful that certain things get declared unconstitutional, and that this is why I hope everyone stays active in their politics, that they're registered to vote and that you do vote. I don't care how you vote, just I hope you all participate in the process. Something else that you do with registered interns is to have them officially connect. Let's see. Oh, connect me by email to their supervisor from the site. Yep. And include elements from the Kentucky agreement. Oh, I don't know that one. So if you want to know what the Kentucky agreement is.
It has the site information, who to contact, what type of site setting it is, all of that information that I think sometimes gets lost. And I actually started incorporating this last year because I had a supervisee who did connect me by email, and the supervisor would not respond to emails. And she was also, it was during the height of COVID. So I was concerned with what type of supervision the student was getting, or I'm sorry, the registered intern was getting, when she was a lot of the times the only person there on Saturdays. And although they were referring to themselves as an agency, I think it was a private practice. So just things like that, where at least if they're documenting it and they say that it's private practice, then I can have a follow-up conversation about the expectations that come with private practice and things like that. So.
Yeah. Well, let's move on. like I said, any one of these topics we could probably spend hours on, but let's move on. One of the areas that we're required to discuss is various delivery systems for supervision, including electronic means, and how these relate to effective supervision models, ensure confidentiality, and address supervision challenges. So who among you is still supervising in person? Stacy is, Christy is, Carrie is, Adina is, Edita is, okay, good. So some of you are doing it in person. Everybody else is either not doing it or doing it electronically. I too am doing it 100% virtually and have been since we were allowed to way back before the pandemic. So talk to us about your decision to stay in person, Christy, or is it just the university?
Yeah, it's just the university. Our accreditation standards, we can't do telehealth anyway. So our students aren't allowed to do telehealth because they're still accredited under COAMFTA version 12. So they can't.
So when you switch to 12.5, then they will.
Right. I hope, because that certainly would, I think that would be a great asset to our community. But yeah, so because of that, they're all on site anyway, and I do 100% supervision in person.
Yeah. Edita, talked about you're doing it in person.
Yeah, mine's more like a hybrid. Most of the time it's telehealth. Sometimes, every other month I like to see them in person.
Okay. All right. So it's just to make sure
so
that
mine are local. I only have 2 right now, so they're local, and so if they can fit it in their schedule and it's convenient, they come and see me in person.
Gotcha.
But most of the time. So
yeah. Stace, same thing. They're local. They're right there in the office anyway.
Most of them are in my office, and then the other ones that are in the community are in, Palm Beach, Dade, or Broward, so they come in. I do offer, occasionally some. I did it this week actually. Somebody was sick. I'm like, don't come in. We'll do it online. But yeah, most of the time, I enjoy the in person.
Yeah. So in person telehealth, I don't believe Florida allows phone, and they do require video. I believe that's correct. So it can so occasionally
it does allow phone. Florida does allow phone.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Michael, remember you and I looked that up.
I'm gonna have to look that one up again.
Yeah, we looked that up
because the last I recalled, it had to be with video. Yeah, they
allow it.
All right. Well, we'll have
to. You can do FaceTime that phone.
No, but I mean, what I mean, Charmaine,
no, you can do it on the
only.
phone. No, you can do it on the phone.
Oh, audio only, no video.
My understanding is that you can also do telephone, because what happens is that you have to provide services to vulnerable populations that don't have access to Wi-Fi or internet.
That's clinical. No, that's clinical. I'm talking about supervision.
Right, sorry. Okay.
Yeah, supervision.
Right.
Yeah. All right, good. Well, it says we've got Tracy is doing a good job here of
it came up recently in supervision. That's
okay.
I saved it because it came up with one of my supervisors who went on maternity leave, and she's like, I said, you don't need to be on the phone after giving birth. I get it. So
all right. Well, then I'll stop feeling guilty that I let people stay on Zoom, but with their camera not working. So I feel better now about that. Yeah, I wouldn't do it audio only as a regular practice, only as a technology issue. But yeah, thank you, Dr.
I do
Tracy.
a hybrid. Hybrid.
You do some that's audio only?
Oh yeah, some that's audio only and some that's
How do you make the decision to do audio only?
Well, once a month, I have to see their face, so I go ahead and do video.
I see.
So I make sure that they are who they say they are, and we check
So
that way
Adita
too.
wants to see them in person and you just want to see their face. Okay.
I want to see their face.
Okay. For me, it's 100% video. Everything is in this kind of a context. So yeah. It's pretty much they'll do what you want if you make it the rule there. So yeah. Renee, how about you? Do you do predominantly video or do you do telephonic only? What do you do? Oh, she's taking a big swig of coffee or something. And if you turn on the mic, we'll hear you.
I'm sorry. I was taking a big swig of something. I'm sorry. Well, I didn't hear your question. I'm sorry.
Are you doing supervision video, in person, phone only? What are you doing?
I don't have any supervisees right now.
Oh, that's right. That's right. So I'll switch over there to Annette.
It's all tele. I mean, I think I've had like twice that they've come in here and we've done an in-person. But it's pretty much all tele.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And Luann, are you mostly video conference?
Actually, I'm only in person.
Only in person.
Yeah.
Good. You must be like
I only have a
everybody's
couple.
local.
Yeah, I only have a couple, so it's
Yeah.
easier that way. And then like I block the time, and that helps me disconnect my therapist hat to switch over.
Janet's
So
question.
It gives me an emotional break, so it works out best.
Right. Are you doing therapy by tele? And that's why that's one of the reasons you like the shift?
I have a setup at home. I have a setup at the office. I do both in person and virtual, back and forth throughout the day.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Great. Okay. So when you think of effective supervision models, this is a big shift now. What do you think of? What are the models of supervision that jumps to mind? Anyone have
Annalyn, can I ask you a question really quickly about ethics?
Yeah.
Okay. So a lot of the information that's listed in the rules and the statutes has to do with registered interns.
Mhm.
And during the pandemic, one of the biggest issues was how do we handle students? And especially students who were, in certain settings that, went all the way to telehealth. Like there was no option for them to try something else where they could do telehealth from the office. Like it went completely to being in their home. Because I know some offices you can come to the office and you can use your computer from the office, but some people they had to do it from home. So when I reached out to the board, there was like no answer, like we do not govern students. And it's like, but we need to be able to provide information to students. So what I generally just do is, whatever the responsibilities are for registered interns, that's kind of like the highest standard. I'm like, we'll go with that.
Mm-hmm.
But it was challenging because there was no language specific to students, whereas with California, there's very specific language about what students are allowed to and not allowed to do. So I don't know. I just want to know if you came across that and if that's something that perhaps might change in the future, where there is specific language about the limitations that students have.
At this time, I know nothing of any pull to do that. In fact, Florida, I think, is perfectly happy to not have any legislation about what students can and cannot do. Right now, they leave that 100% up to the university. But the one thing they did do is that they require all mental health and MFT registered interns to have graduated from an accredited program. So it did kind of increase the standard so that now all students have to be under an accreditation that does govern how many hours, what conditions they can do it in, who their supervisor is, all of that kind of stuff. So both KCREP and COAMFTE have those kind of standards. Now, COAMFTE 12.5 allows for telehealth. All of their student hours can be telehealth, but there's no rule about does there have to be a license on site or none of that is in the COAMFTE standards. That's now up to the agency to make the decision. So whatever level the agency is comfortable with. Now, some agencies are pretty flexible, shall we say. I had a Capella student who was an active duty military person stationed in Sicily, Italy. And from Sicily, she was doing telehealth with families in Florida through a Florida agency, because that agency was happy to let that happen. Some agencies are like, you have to come into the office. You can do telehealth, but you have to be in the office. Other agencies are, we're shutting down the office. Nobody's here. You physically can't be here, so you need to do it from home. So, you know, this made it interesting for faculty supervisors, academic supervisors, to be in touch with the agency supervisor to know what's going on here, to make sure that they have sufficient support. But no, Florida says it's up to the university to make all of those decisions. So like you said, Tracy, you know, you can decide what standard you as a university or you as an agency can decide what standard you're going to hold. Yeah.
And can I say something? What we did was, when we received the emergency order from Tallahassee during the pandemic, it included also the practicum students. So when COVID came, March of 2020, those students were sent immediately home. Some of those places that were hot zones, you know, they were closed, but other facilities allowed them to do telehealth under this emergency order from the Department of Health during the pandemic. So that's so, but now slowly, well, most everybody's already returned back on site, but they're doing, some of the hospitals are still practicing a hybrid model of in-person and telehealth as well. And also, effective this fall, we now have to do the practicum supervision on campus, because we were remote since March.
So now it's in person.
Yeah.
In person. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. There's no clear guideline. And I believe Florida says that registered interns can continue to do telehealth up until 2026. It's 26, Charmaine. I couldn't remember who was 5 or 6. Yeah. So
26.
My suspicion is that by the time we get to 26, unless something horrific happens in a telehealth context, that this will just become standard practice. Unless they decide to do something, and I've heard nothing about this, but you know, they could decide that some percentage or some number of the hours can be telehealth, but there's no whisper of that happening. The only other whisper that is happening doesn't really affect us as supervisors, but it does affect registered interns, is that mental health and marriage and family are wanting to advocate for a name change from registered intern to a licensed associate. So it would be an LMFTA or LMHCA. And there are well over 20 states that already have this. Some of those states require that they pass the exam first before they get that. There's no talk in Florida of doing that. It would just be a straight up name change. So that rather than registered intern, it would be an affiliate license, which will make it very interesting with the insurance companies, since they will have a license, but will not necessarily have passed the exam. So, but that's just on the horizon. It is not here yet, and it could be several years out before that will happen. So since we like the legal stuff and we like the ethical stuff, how about we talk about some ethical things? What guidelines for the platform used for telehealth? Yeah, Catherine, what are some guidelines that you require for the people who do telehealth?
I require them to use a HIPAA compliant guide platform. And if some of my people are supervised record sessions, so in the informed consent, having permission for that, permission that it's telehealth, and that it'll be recorded and shown to the supervisor. So via the virtual platform as well. So I know that there's some people who were doing FaceTime, and I wasn't sure. I was looking at the statute a little while back to see if that was still kind of, if it tightened up in terms of whether or not that was an appropriate platform, or some people were using, you know, non-HIPAA compliant stuff. So I didn't know if there was anything official that came down from the board.
Not from Florida. Now, HHS at one time said that, you know, if you could use a platform, you know, with reasonable expectation that it would be, you know, to maintain confidentiality. And I have not seen what HHS says now, because that's the feds. So that would be something to look up to see if there is federal guidance on that you have to have HIPAA compliant. And then, of course, you would want to get documentation from the platform that states that they are HIPAA compliant. Many of them will say that they are highly encrypted, but will not go all the way to saying that they're HIPAA compliant.
Yeah, I think technically you're supposed to have a BAA agreement with them in order for it to be HIPAA compliant. So you're saying Florida does not have that regulation as part of their rules?
No, not at this time. Not at this time. Yeah, I think it's because what the rule is at the federal level. Larry, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to ask, since most people are at least hybrid, if not all virtual in supervision, and other than talking about a case, we were in getting into the recording of their work with clients. How are you getting access to see them work with the client? What are people doing in your practices? How do you manage that?
I have a Zoom, the professional Zoom, so I'm able to see, you know, they're able to share screen and I can watch the videos they may share.
Do you have some sites that they're at where the site will not allow them to record?
I have not. That's one of the things that I require, because if I'm going to sign off on their work, I want to see what they're doing. So for me, that's just one of my rules.
Yeah.
Sure. What about others? Thank you.
I have supervisors at sites that don't allow recording.
Right. Yeah. Mine either. But I do require some raw data occasionally, which would include redacted notes, treatment plans, psychosocial assessments that we go through, especially in private practice, where we're having to create their own forms. We go through that thing with a fine-tooth comb, and we go through their notes redacted and the treatment planning and such.
Good. Good. Thank you, Sherman. What about others? How do you observe your registered interns' work?
It's mostly document review, and it's easier. It's less anxiety provoking for me when they're at an agency where, you know, they're hounding them to get their documentation done. And with those, I'll ask for an occasional redacted note to see how they're doing it and what kind of notes they write, because supervisors in a lot of rehab places will just sign off on anything. And it's this one client or this one intern who has really gone all in on private practice that, you know, without notes, and I'm not getting them, it would be, you know, some kind of format to share it, and that's not happening. So I'm getting ready to release that person from our relationship.
Yeah.
Let me just say, I'll say this: if someone wants to go into private practice and I'm like reluctant, I send them to Stacy, because I say to them, okay, Stacy or Michael, but specifically Stacy, because she runs a private practice that sees interns in that way. And I say, so you think okay, go to Stacy, because Stacy has a requirement that is more stringent than mine, and we'll see how that goes. Typically they come back and do what I asked.
Does anyone supervise school counselors who are also registered interns? And
I got Tracy and Stacy both nodding. Stacy, any thoughts on that?
What's your question about it, Michael?
Well, my question is, I have two, and the one was keeping at least her own notes, but then the other, my problem child, I spoke with the supervisor to say, you have a link on the school board website, and my intern is telling me that you are actively discouraging them from using it. And the supervisor said, exactly. And so the school board or the supervisors are saying it's going to create a liability if we keep notes. And they're not recognizing that if they're required by law to have notes and they're not keeping them, and they have a system in place that they're not observing, I can't wait for some smart lawyer to, you know, blow something up. But the thing here is, you know, that school counselors and their idea, you know, it seems like, you know, 10-minute sessions, they don't really have a consent agreement. They do talk to the parents and share all sorts of information. And it's like, but you're a registered intern and that's a higher standard, and that's the standard you have to follow. And they're just not, you know, at least one of them is just not getting it. The other one has come into compliance to, you know, cooperate. But even there, the whole discussion around informed consent and confidentiality and keeping track of, it's a 5-minute pop-in versus a formal session like we would know in other settings. Talk about the Wild West. But the supervisor actively discouraging keeping notes, documentation.
Yeah, no, both of mine are keeping notes. One of them, she was a school counselor for many years, and now she is finally what is going to become a licensed mental health counselor.
Right.
So she had, I mean, she started the whole system. It's in a private school, so she has notes and all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we literally just had the whole discussion about, you know, what to put in notes, what to share with parents, how to share with parents. Like in the last couple of weeks, we were just talking about this.
Yeah, Florida law doesn't require much in the record. They're very vague, and it's not a lot of items, but they do have some things like Michael identified there that are required in the records. And if ever they were to be investigated and they didn't have a treatment plan, documentation of when we met and how much they paid and who was there, and progress notes, you know, then they would be in trouble potentially.
Yeah. You know, what goes in the file
So
is
I agree.
6 or 8 items, like you mentioned, the treatment plan and all of that. And progress note is one of it. They're not very specific. That comes down to training and which model or outline you use to what goes into the progress note. That's not in statute that I've ever seen.
No, it's not, or a rule.
Or a rule.
No, they don't want to be that specific in Florida. Yeah.
I have a question about notes. So I supervise quite a few students, and some of the third-year doctoral students, I'm providing soup of soup. I don't know if that's the correct term. They are supervising the master's students.
Okay.
So when it comes to progress notes, are the doctoral students that are the soup of soup allowed to sign the master's student? These are pre-master students. Are they allowed to sign those notes and I'm still overseeing all of it? So our, just to let you know, in our clinic, there's audio and visual recording. So I can see any session at any time. I can pull that up. So I feel like I have a tremendous amount of oversight, but to be honest, the signing of the notes, it's very tedious. I hate to admit that. So I am wondering right now, I'm signing everybody's notes. I have the doctoral students that are the supervisors, and I'm the super. So I have them read the notes, and then there's a way for them to kind of check. I've read the note. I don't, and we have all these little flag markers if there are any concerns. And then I go back in and sign every one. But is it okay for a non-licensed person to sign a progress note? So these doctoral students are registered interns.
Yeah, but they're in training to become a supervisor.
Right, and the people they're supervising are students pre-masters. Right. So again, Florida State, the law would not be oversight of them, only the university. So I would say you would go back to your accreditation as for guidance on that. And if your accreditation doesn't say anything about notes that have to be signed and all that sort of stuff, to my knowledge, there's nothing in the AMFT approved supervisor candidate requirements that they sign the notes of the people they supervise. That isn't anywhere in those requirements. And the students are not regulated by the state, but of course you're wanting to teach them to do proper notes.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, nowhere does it say anything about. So the note has to be signed by the person who provided the service. That's what the law says, but it doesn't even really apply to the student because the student is not under the law.
Now we have the therapist has to sign their case note, but then it has to be approved by a supervisor. So I have the signature line for the therapist, and then below that is the signature line for the supervisor.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering if the doctoral students can sign the master's students notes as their supervisor.
I don't see any reason why they couldn't. There's nothing that I know in COAMFT accreditation or in the law that says that they couldn't do that, nor do I see anything that says that they must do that.
Okay.
But I'm pretty clear you don't have to sign all 1,000 case notes.
That would be amazing.
It does take a lot of time, doesn't it?
Yeah. So I'll double check the accreditation standards.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I in my reading of everything under the master's anyway, the master's accreditation standards, no place does it say that you as clinical director have to countersign their notes.
Okay. That'll be great. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. But of course, if you are Stacey, all the people that are in your office, do you countersign all of their notes? Heck no, she says. No. Yeah. So there's nobody's countersigning notes there. Even Stacey, even the ones that they're billing to insurance, you don't sign those?
They don't bill insurance.
Oh, okay.
I never decided to do that. I'm private.
Dr. Tracy, do you countersign the notes when they bill to insurance?
I sign
there you do. So
it is very tedious. So I agree with you. And I'm also the one reviewing their notes too. So I'm like, yeah.
It's just it's so much. It takes up so much time that I think if there's any way that I could ethically pass that off to someone else to do, I would love it.
It makes sense in Dr. Tracy's sense to sign up on those because, as you said before, Cigna and Aetna build the supervisor, so that makes sense. But as far as school is concerned, I would agree with Anna Lynn. You have to go to the accreditation policies for that.
And I have a question, Christy. Are these students at an external practicum site or in-house?
No, they're at FSU with me. So again, like I said, I have audio visual recordings of every session, and I feel like I have tremendous oversight on what they're doing in the therapy room. Not to mention, I have access to all of their case notes at any time. I can pull that up and double check any concerns that I have. But yeah, it's just actually signing each one of those notes, because each master's student that I have, and I have 5, each one has about 12 clients they see.
Yeah.
I don't remember how it was at Nova, but did faculty sign those notes? No,
That would
just-
be me.
At
I am-
Nova,
I
when
am
we did
Actually, yes,
faculty.
at Nova, the practicum instructor was to
Practicum,
sign
yeah.
the notes. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Okay,
signed the notes, but if they're, because I would supervise the doctoral students who were getting super from me, I signed the notes because I'm the primary therapist who's licensed. And even if the soup was licensed, I still, because it was under the university, had to sign the notes.
so the faculty, not the clinical director then?
Faculty.
Yeah,
No, yeah,
For the
not
practicum.
clinical director.
makes sense.
Yeah.
That's a lot of notes, Christy.
Yeah, right.
Annette, do you require notes, video of raw data? What do you get?
Well, currently everyone's using a telehealth. They can't record. So no raw, so just notes, some raw data, redacted. And for one of my interns, I am very close with, in fact, got him the job there with the person that runs that agency. And we have spoke about him and his cases. How's he doing? So that would just be a common thing for us to talk about. I mean, she's quite grateful I sent him there. So he's a good therapist. So luckily I have really good interns, I think overall. It's luck right now, I don't know where to knock. But I am definitely hearing everybody and keeping my eyes wide open. So I really am thankful to be a part of this.
Yeah.
So why do you say, Annette, that because it's virtual, they can't record?
They're in a type of HIPAA compliant that can't record within. Telehealth delivery system. I don't know how to describe
So
it.
the platform, the
There
video
you go. Thank
conferencing
you. The
platform will
telehealth
not allow
platform
it.
they're using won't allow recording.
So
I
that's what
could
the
require
agency,
them
whatever
to-
the agency is using is not
Right.
allowing it.
Mm-hmm. I guess I could require them, like Dr. McKay was saying, to buy their own platform and do that. That might be advisable if I right now I don't have a lot of concerns.
Another thing that you could do is get permission from the client to record and then have them recorded in Otter so that you could get a simultaneous transcription that then could be, the audio could be erased and then you could review transcripts with them.
Oh,
Be
okay.
another way
Otter.
to get raw data. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Otter
Thank
is
you.
not free, but it's not bad and would allow for that. How about you, Kathy Dan? What do you do with your registered interns?
So my setup's a little bit different. I don't bill any insurance and all of mine work for me in my practice. So we do mostly everything is live and in person. I do a little bit of supervision with them. You know, if they're not going to be in the office, and that's when they don't have any clients, the day that we have supervision planned, we'll do that via Zoom. But otherwise, I really know all of their clients and I'm pretty like intimately involved in it because they've gotten them through my practice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Keeps
Okay.
it pretty streamlined.
Do you ever like live observe any of their work, anything like that? Yeah. Great.
Yeah, I do. And my student intern is also recording some. She is at school virtual, but Wake Forest, and they require that also. So I work hand in hand with her supervisor at, that's not what she calls it, but at Wake. And so we work in tandem supervising her.
Yeah, and I wonder as a follow-up question for those that do see or listen to audio or watch video recording, how do you think your supervision of the registered intern differs because you actually hear or see them working with the client, the raw data?
I'll answer for me. I don't know. I'm sure everybody has a different answer. So I think that when I have clinicians that are verbally giving me feedback about what they're doing in the room, there's a lot that's missing. and of nuance that can't be captured, that's captured when I'm seeing it live. There's a fair amount of them going, well, I think I did that. There's a lot of holes in it. When I'm sort of making some recommendations, they tend to, if I haven't seen it live, kind of say they've done that. But when I'm able to like really be very specific about different ways that they could do it, if I've either sat in on a session or I've watched it or listened to it back, I can be very detail oriented about some other kinds of, interventions I would possibly use.
That's great.
And there's so much that's lost, like with body language and tone and all of that, when they're just telling me what they've done. So we do a lot of couples counseling. That's what my practice has most of. So there's just so much different moving pieces that for me and what we do, it's really helpful for me to see them in action.
I taught one of these, and the supervisor said that all the trainees lie. That's why he insists on seeing videos. Now, what he meant, of course, is their perspective of what they did is different than actually watching. Yeah. Even transcript gets a little bit closer. You get to see their actual words, but like you said, you lose all of the voice inflection and body language. Yeah, very much. Very much. How about you, Carrie? What do you require video? You walk in and see them. What do you do?
Agencies, so they can't video. My private practice interns, they've had several people decline video, but with one of my problem children, I actually attended 3 sessions with him it was a brand new client, just to watch what was going on. So, and I've had some of the interns actually say, I would love it if you would come into a session, but it's always kind of a scheduling thing. If I'm seeing clients at the same time that they are, it's not going to work. But it's mostly raw data, and especially those in the agency work, they can show me redacted raw data. But I have gone in at least 3 times with one of them just to observe, and it was pretty interesting. And I think it got the person actually off to a good start with the client. I think it helped end some habits that I think he was engaging in. He's very anxious, and he would engage in very strange habits. He would chew on his beard, keep shoving his beard in his mouth and chew on it.
You wouldn't know that from a transcript, would you?
No,
or from a case note. Yeah.
Or a case.
Yeah. And it's just, I really enjoyed like being in there and just watching him and it was a good experience. But most of the time that we've had several that have declined, and those that are on telehealth, again, the platform won't allow that recording. So we've not been able to record telehealth, but I didn't know about Otter.
Yep. Okay, cool. So let's talk about some ethical boundary supervisor challenge kinds of issues. What kinds of ethical issues or legal snafus? I think we can cycle back to Charmaine. Where'd you go, Charmaine? You're here someplace.
I'm here.
I lost her. There you are, down there. Okay. When you guys turn on and turn off your cameras, you all shift in position, so I lose you. So tell us again about the person that you're working with, and she is being required to share information on clients who maybe cannot, because they're minors, actually give consent for that to happen.
Well, it's an immigration issue with undocumented minors.
Yes.
And they're in a facility with the government, U.S. government. And
so the U.S. government is the guardian. So they are the in local parentis, is it,
correct,
as they say?
Correct.
Yes. And so the government can be the ones that gives permission.
Well, they're using this information. I don't know if you guys listen to the NPR recording about this a couple of years ago, and then in 2021 there was an interesting letter written from the ACA to the White House about the confidentiality that was broken, and for what we do as therapists. And so when she told me she was working with government agencies who would see clients who are undocumented immigrants in this way, and some of the requirements that might happen, I sort of was alarmed about the confidentiality leveraging. So we did a deep dive situation.
Okay, so let's talk about where else this happens. A lot of you will work with trainees who are at a community mental health, who bill Medicaid, and are required to talk to DCF, talk to investigators, who are required to share information with DCF workers, court reports, and there's no way of the agency controlling what happens to that information. So Charmaine, what is your experience that makes this different than, say, DCF?
They're saying that the undocumented persons, or they were saying that the undocumented persons did not have rights to confidentiality.
Oh, so perhaps under the law they don't. Yeah.
Right.
Perhaps under the law. Yeah.
So we argued that with ACA, and they amended it in 2021 or 2021.
Okay, so that undocumented do now have rights to confidentiality.
Is what I'm understanding. Yeah.
That's certainly in there.
Yeah.
There's nothing in Florida law that says, in fact, in Florida law, it says that there's confidentiality, period. Even to a 1-day-old child.
I learned that from you.
There is no age limit. It's not like confidentiality begins at a particular age, and the law is not clear about what parents are allowed to have information to. It's very murky in the law about that. If you want to hear more about that, you can go to the Fin YouTube and look at the 2 recordings that's called You've Been Subpoenaed, Now What? That talks about therapists being subpoenaed and how do you prevent, what do you do to prepare for that happening? And then once you've been subpoenaed, what happens? And Rebecca Cantor talks about those very issues and how it's very murky about that. So, so
and that was the problem.
Florida, at least in Florida, they would have confidentiality regardless of what the feds say.
Yeah, they weren't covered by the Privacy Act, is what I'm reading here. They were exclude United States citizens or unlawful permanent residents. Right, unlawful permanent residencies from protection of the Privacy Act.
And that you're saying that has been amended?
Yeah, well, from what the other briefing that I read, yes.
Okay. Yeah. So that this was a problem prior, is what you were saying.
Yeah, it wasn't, because I was concerned that this has not been addressed from the NPR discussion, and then we went into what we're doing about it as what our ethics boards were doing about it, and we came across a letter from ACA addressing this directly to the United States government, to the White House, and they came back with White House briefings addressing that. Now, it's still pretty like the language. There was an order, a presidential order that said that put this in place. So my question was, well, does the briefing cover this? Like say, okay, we're not doing this anymore, or do we need to amend the presidential order that says now the act is, we cover undocumented persons? So that's still up in the air.
Yeah, the only way that this becomes
executive order
really change, is an executive order goes to law. That's the only way. But even law can be changed. So frankly, everything is temporary. All you have to do is look at Roe v. Wade. Everything is temporary. So, we can get statutes in place, executive orders can be made, but even putting it concretized into law does not mean that it's now forever, because
not unless it's codified, right?
Even then, it's got it has to be in the Constitution, but even the Constitution can be amended. It's harder, but even that can be changed. So,
Just in case
yeah.
you guys wanted the executive order number, it's executive order number 13768.
13768. Very
Mhm.
interesting. Yeah. All right. So that sounds like that became an ethical issue for you as to,
Yeah,
do I want to
absolutely.
supervise
This
this
person that
person?
could.
Sure.
Mhm,
Sure.
mhm.
Yeah. What other sorts of ethical issues have come up where you've had to supervise someone around maybe a boundary issue or a dual relationship issue or anything like that? Yes, Larry.
Yeah, so I had an intern who worked in a community mental health agency, and she was a very generous person. Didn't have, not that she had great funds herself, but she would got into a habit of wanting to buy things for the client. So it may be that they didn't have a jacket to wear to school, and she would go to Walmart or wherever and buy a jacket for them. And so that became an ethical issue that I raised with her about the boundaries there. And we talked about how that could present a problem and so on. And so she thought on it for a while after the discussion and did make some adjustments. She would still, and she worked mostly with children and their families by working with the children. So she did do some adjustments, but the adjustments were more like getting them a little toy that they might like that only cost $1 or $2 versus going out and, buying a mattress for them or something like that.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I had to take a guy to task because he kept buying birthday cakes and taking them to the families. Yeah. Similar kinds of issues. Yeah. What about, yes, Edita?
So I had one that I was kind of, made the hair on the back of my neck stand up a little bit. So, I had to really, really, be stern with my intern on not to follow through on the plan that he was going to do. So a local church was providing counseling and charging people their regular rate, providing they had students providing counseling, marriage counseling, individual counseling. They were not registered interns. They didn't have, a master's level education. They didn't have any type of education, and they were charging these people money. And they had essentially no idea that these people were students, right? So, my intern somehow came across this church and he wanted to have some couples counseling experience. So, he was going to go and work for them. And I was like, absolutely not. You are not going to go work for them, because you're working under my license. And, and we had a bunch of discussions about this. He kept going on and on and on about the purpose of the church and stuff. And I was like, there's just no way that you're going to be able to do that. And then he ended up dropping it. But there's just so many churches that do these kinds of things, that are kind of shady. And, you come across these kind of stories sometimes through the news, but this is something that I've personally experienced that was,
Yeah, they usually come in
didn't feel good.
under the pastoral counseling caveat.
Right.
That allows them to do that. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, but so as a supervisor, you have to decide what you're willing to be happening under your license. I agree.
Well, I wasn't okay with, because it was a business. It was like a registered business doing this, in our community, and I really didn't want my name on that. So
yeah.
And Lynn, there's a statute that addresses that, isn't there?
Yes. You want to talk about it, Michael?
Just saying that if you are in association with anyone that you know or suspect of violating any of the rules and statutes of the board, you're liable. So that's your reason for telling your intern, no. I can't associate with you if you're going to associate with them.
Right, that's right.
Yeah. Any other juicy ethical issues? Yes, Robin.
So several years ago, I had a former client who, I guess maybe a year or two after we terminated, he decided to go to school and work on a master's degree, or I think it was a master's degree, and asked me if I would, if I could do a practicum with him. So, for me, it was a no-brainer that the ethical or moral decision was, oh my God, this guy, in no way would I ever want him or think that he would be a good therapist. But at that point, that was beyond, but I would not, engage in that kind of relationship.
I think our handout called that serial dual relationship, right? That they're not simultaneously dual,
Right.
but they're in series, right? Yeah. Okay. Any others that happened? Annette, you got any ones that you've? Yeah. All right. Good.
Well, it's not a very juicy one. So, I mean, recently I had an intern and she was pregnant, and obviously she was going on maternity leave, and she's only done virtual therapy, and many of her clients came to her because of various struggles with their own ability to become pregnant. And because she's only been virtual, none of them knew she was pregnant. And so we had to kind of talk through, do you need to, since it's already not been known that you were pregnant, do you need to discuss this with them that you're going on maternity leave, or can you just take a medical leave? And it was like precarious to kind of walk through. I was glad we got to some really good decisions with it. But it did remind me, first of all, I was pregnant when I was a therapist, and it was a very awkward thing because it felt like absolute lack of privacy about what's going on in your personal life. Your pregnancy gets discussed regularly. Oh, you're getting bigger. Clients reach out and touch your belly. It was a really difficult thing to go through. And there was a little bit of me that was a wee bit jealous, like, oh, wow, you get to be pregnant. Nobody has to know. And then there was also like, of course, you have kept this from them, which is okay, except that now to come to them when they've kind of like in your last session, because you're taking off for a couple months to go have a baby, and say, yeah, I'm having a baby. Oh yeah, I never told you that I'm pregnant, and you can't have babies. You're on your second time around or something. So we just talked through it a lot and kind of talked through, like, if it was private up to now, why wouldn't we just keep it private? And but it did make me realize how much gets lost in virtual therapy and how much then people lost and maybe gained. I don't know, but it just brought that up to, like, I don't know what people think about any of that, but her and I really talked through how to handle this with her clients. And I think overall it went really well in the complete transfer. So.
Nice. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks. Anyone else?
Yeah, Kathy was kind of agreeing with some of that. Do you want to share, Kathy, your experience?
And then Carrie.
And then Carrie, yeah.
Yeah, I was just agreeing with being pregnant and doing the therapy with people, and how there was like this weird inability to create that boundary that we normally are able to have.
Telehealth does.
Yeah. So I was just sort of thinking back to when I was experiencing that myself.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
Carrie.
Had a couple of interns that have had conflict between kind of like, best practice, what's the right thing to do, boundaries, all that, with agencies that are asking them to skate right along the line of something. Again, I loved how Adita said that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. One was an intern that was working for an agency that worked with foster care children in foster homes. And she was being consistently asked to transport her clients in her personal vehicle to a new foster home. Like the kid got left, nobody, the foster mother refused to take this child to the new foster home setting. They tried everyone, and her supervisor at work said, you're going to have to do it. She did it. She talked to me about it afterwards, and she told me she physically wanted to vomit when she was told to do it, not because she doesn't like the client, but because of the liability. I wanted to vomit after she told me. I'm clutching my chest like, oh my gosh, well, all the things that could have gone wrong. And I kept requesting for her supervisor to contact me because I wanted to find out, was this a requirement of your agency? And do you understand the liability? So she finally stood up to the supervisor and said, I am not comfortable with this, and I'm not being reimbursed for mileage or gas, besides the fact the million, trillion, billion other things that can go wrong having a client in your car. And then another one that was working in substance abuse that was consistently being told by another department, you need to push this client to continue in treatment in IOP or PHP. We need you to get him to sign or her to sign on board with this. And we talked about undue influence. And I said, autonomy, client rights, all that stuff. And, she was very, very ethical. And she kept pushing back and telling them, it is not my job to make anyone do anything. They can make their own decision. But that sometimes this stuff just really, makes your skin crawl what they're being told to do. And then finally, back to one of my problem children, he wants to socialize with everyone else's clients as they come in to see their therapist, because there's a couple other therapists I share space with, and he wants to socialize with them. And I had to talk with him about their clients are not here for your social needs. He followed one of my clients right into the room talking about, because there was a young man that came in wearing a Miami Dolphins jacket and a hat, and he just walked right in as he's coming into his session talking to him about football. And I stood there glaring at him like, what do you think this is? What setting do you think this is as a therapist? So it's helping. Sometimes I think some of them have that struggle with, well, it's not my client. Is it okay for me to chit chat? So working on that kind of stuff. And that's more along the lines of professionalism, but still you're crossing a boundary. So, but I'm curious if others have that with agency work interns that are being pushed to do, they skate right on that line of
mine is similar.
The tipping point.
Mine is similar to the one make them sign is the family is done, but they won't let me terminate. They're making me continue seeing the client, even though they've met goals and they really not need to be here anymore. And that's a real challenge as a supervisor, because on the one hand, I'm thinking, don't do that, push back. And the intern is saying, but I need a job. And it's not so easy to find a job. This is where I start saying things like, be sure you get a copy of the employee handbook. Make sure you have handy your job description. Let's check the ethical codes. Let's pull up the law. I have had people copy the law and take it to their supervisor, particularly out of the laws and rules class. Those kinds of things is a way to push back. I had one gal who simply asked for the Medicaid guidelines, wanted a copy of the Medicaid guidelines. They never asked her to do anything weird thereafter. So there are ways for them to push back without losing their jobs. But sometimes you need to go find another job.
Or job offers will be withdrawn.
Yeah. So you got to get out of there. Yeah.
There was a weird protocol. One of my interns looking for information about their reporting sex abuse, and having to go through the supervisor and the clinical director who may not be on site. And they had some timing issues with it, pretty much to delay or hinder reporting. And when he just asked about it, as far as, I was filling out pre-hire paperwork and everything like that. And I noticed this and I had some questions. They said, let's get back to you. And when they got back, they said, we're withdrawing our offer just for asking.
Yeah, well, and though that is painful,
Yeah.
I have worked in many different jobs, and I have never left because of the clients. I have always left because of the hinky administration. Always. Always. I guess that's part of what inspired me to teach laws and rules. So I would always be having to refresh on that. So yeah, so that's good. That's good.
I think Charmaine had her
Yes,
hand up.
Charmaine.
Oh, I forgot what I was going to say, but I do have something maybe. This just came up the other day where an intern works or is working with the a board for obstetrics and gynecology and pregnancy, and so she was asked to run a psychoeducational group online for moms who have lost a baby. And wanted to know if she can count those hours toward licensure. And so I said no. No. They were all the moms were all over the United States, and I said, are you going to have someone there? And because this is a private practice situation, you'd have to see them through your private practice. And so the same things would apply. What kind of paperwork are they filling out? What kind of, documentation do you have? And I'm only licensed in Florida. So, certainly you can volunteer with the agency and be in tandem with a licensed person or a supervisor there, but not for licensure.
Yeah. I had an intern who had a client who became depressed, was not coming to her daily group. This was a setting where it was like IPO or PHP. They came every day, and she disappeared for several days. Comes back, intern learns that she's been depressed in bed for the last 3 days. And the intern said, and who's been taking care of your 2-year-old child? Oh, the child was just crawling around on the floor and, and so the intern, to her credit, swung into action, got the grandmother contacted, made sure there were services in place, all this kind of stuff. And then I said, and when did you call the abuse registry? And she said, oh, then the head nurse said I didn't have to. I said, I'm saying you do have to.
Yeah.
And so she wasn't happy about it, but she went back the next day and made the call with the client. It went very well. But a month later, it happened again. And if she hadn't called the first time, when it happened the second time, it would be the first time as far as the state was concerned. But because it was the second time, the state came and removed the child and gave the child to the grandparent, right? So for her, this was it wasn't a dilemma for me. I knew she had to do this, but I did understand that the agency might say, we know them, that we had a long-term relationship with them. You don't really need to make that call, or those kinds of things. And that becomes a real dilemma for them that we as supervisors have to help them walk through. Yeah. All right. Well, we're down to our last 30 minutes. Wow. Let me make sure that
let me jump
covering
in,
stuff.
Ellen.
Yeah. Do it.
Janet had a question she raised earlier about time management as a supervisor, and how do we take it? Basically, self-care, I think, would be part of what you're asking about. So just like we have to talk to our registered interns about self-care, we have to model self-care. So I'm wondering, to the group, what do people do to kind of protect your own self as a supervisor and do self-care and managing the time with your intern?
Or as Janet was saying, making the shift from clinician to supervisor and then back to clinician.
Right.
I have learned the rule of no. No is a complete sentence. So what I was doing in my earlier days as a supervisor was trying to take on a lot more people, a lot more people and all of this. And I was doing a lot of things that really burnt me out. So though I can see up to 25, I will not. I will cap myself off. I will refer to wonderful practitioners like you all, who are more than capable to do this work as well, in this field. And so I've learned to say no and refer to those who are equally as capable. And that's helped tremendously.
So you keep your intern caseload at a certain level.
At a certain level.
Gotcha.
Now I do. Before I didn't, but now I do, because people would say, well, you came highly referred. I saw you there. I wanted to work with you. I waited for you. And I'm like, okay, great. And it was just too much. So I learned to say, that's great. And you know who else is really great? Michael Rose, Ellen Schooley, Stacy, and those, and they come to you guys.
Thank you.
One of the things I did for self-care, piggybacking on what Charmaine said, was to actually increase my fee, because I think that helped to, not because I wanted to like necessarily get more money, although I think that's great for me and my family, but it was more so to identify people who were really serious about their supervision process. And I think the rules changed where like there's no individual supervision, or maybe there was never a requirement, because most of my supervision, how I understood it, was from what COAMP required. Like there needs to be some individual supervision, but Florida doesn't require that. So
actually it does. Hang on. Yes, it does. Out of the 100 hours of supervision, 50 of it must be individual, which means 2-on-1, which is a funky definition. Yeah.
Okay. So that being said, I predominantly do individual supervision. I do no more than 2 supervisors.
One-on-one? You mean one-on-one?
One-on-one or up to 2 supervisors.
2-on-1.
So, I try my best to limit, like it's only in an emergency that I do group supervision. And what I found is that it helps me to, one, focus on what that supervisor is doing. Like I can review notes, I can review their data, observable data, so that when there's like 8, I think I sometimes I confuse COAMP and when I'm talking about this, whether it's 6 or 8 students in a group or supervisors in a group, I feel like it's too much.
6.
Yeah, it's 6 for Florida. Yeah.
So when I'm reviewing how many, I'm like, no, I can't. Only like, okay, we can't meet next week, and it's the only week. No, you have your weeks that you're here. You have your weeks that you're here. We're only doing 3 or 4 because you have to take your licensure exam next week or something like that. So things like that have really helped me to manage how much I'm doing.
But group supervision is not required for Florida.
It's not required.
You can, but if it had, like Dr. Schooley said, half has to be individual. So when you do, you can't see everybody in group all the time. You have to have that one-on-one or individual at least half the time.
Right. So my fee is individual and group are the same. It doesn't
same.
So that's
same.
why it's like that's really helped me after.
This is a great point though, because I hear supervisors charging different rates, and I get kind of nervous about that, because I hear from interns, so you're charging this while other persons are charging this nice, so I say, well, I look at the market. I look at, what Stacy's doing. I look at what Mike's doing. I look at what Annalyn's doing, and I look at where we are. And that's the market analysis that I use for that, my credentials and things like that. You can't just, folks are being charged $160 per hour for supervision. And I mean, more than that in some cases, depending on how you work with them. But I just wonder, how do you guys decide on what to charge? I do the market analysis. I think I'm one of the few people that charge what I do, given, I've been told that I'm diluting our analytics for the lower end. But then I refer to Annalyn and Michael, and I said, they're diluting it, so go to them. So.
I want to know what everybody else is charging so I can
I mean, you need to up it. I know what you charge. You need to up it.
Stacy.
No qualms.
Stacy, you were waving at us?
I charged $100 an hour for individual. There's 2 people in the room. They pay $50 each. And then for group, it's $35 an hour. And I do run my groups for 2 hours at a time. So then it's $70, you know. That's, and I've never, I mean, that's been my rate forever, and I don't change that. I just up my rates on my private pay clients. So, and, you know, I don't know, I probably should go up, but I feel like they're not making a lot of money, the registered interns. So I'd like to try and give them a break.
I was unduly influenced by Dr. Schooley, so.
Unduly?
Unduly.
Yeah, I've been telling her she needs to raise her rates for years.
So long.
Well, all of you are doing better than me. I have to offer free supervision. Enjoy any time you're getting.
And sign your heart away there, Christy.
Yeah. Yeah. You need to get, you
The
need to get a
private
stamp.
practitioners are doing better than people in academia.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Don't forget that.
For sure.
You mean 64, Larry, right? 64 before?
64
Yeah,
before.
64
Sorry.
before. Yeah, but it says basically that of 100 hours, 50 of them must be individual, and up to 50 can be group, and a group
Yeah.
is capped at 6.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's in my
Yeah.
supervision agreement as well.
Yeah.
Mine
That
too.
language.
Yeah. Yeah.
So one
So-
of the things I do to help myself with I don't really like to have supervision and clients on the same day. Every once in a while, it has to happen that way because of life, right? But overall, Thursday is my supervision day, and I don't see clients on Thursday. It's also my paperwork day. It's record podcast day. It's a lot of that stuff. It's so I try to get my supervisees to want to be supervised on that day. And I think they feel like they get a little bit better a net. I mean, they definitely do. They get more of my attention. But every once in a while, somebody's got a doctor's appointment. I have a doctor's appointment, life happens, and we have to move them. And I really don't do well with supervision between clients. Clients, client, fine, client, supervision, client. A net isn't very good. So then I try to build a break either before or behind that, lunch or something. But it's just not the right match for my brain. So I just don't do it as much as possible. Whoever that question was. And for
Janet,
St. Pete,
yeah.
I do the same thing, market analysis. 65 is for individual shared. If that one person needs individual only, it's 120. And I'm probably a little bit on the low end, I think, for St. Pete. I don't want to put anybody on the spot that's also in St. Pete, so I'll just let that be.
Janet, I do the same thing as well. I have one day that I do supervision, and that's and I don't do it every Saturday. I do it Saturdays, and I do it about 8 hours at a clip. But I do that every other Saturday. So like Stacy, I do 2-hour sessions. And so it's every other Saturday. And I do not do supervision. Well, that's not true. I have someone who has to have 200 hours for Ohio. So I will see them on alternating Fridays that I'm not doing Saturdays. So if I do a Friday for him, then I'm not doing Saturday and vice versa. But it's always confined so that I'm not, just like Annette says, I'm not mixing up my duties. Yeah. That's how I do it.
I think it's just
Okay,
really
so-
individual. I'm fine, but telehealth, I don't like it. It hurts my eyes. It gives me headaches. So I'm really strict about how many telehealth sessions I'll have. I'll make sure I don't do too many in a row, but if I have people in the waiting room, supervisees, clients, I can shift hats really well. And I think it's probably because I'm doing a lot of the supervision I'm doing is for the people in private practice, and my clients all know, hey, I could get a knock on the door because something's going down. So I don't know. To me, that's not a problem, but I think it's great that everybody, knows individually what they need. I need to work Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and that's it. That's.
Oh, okay. Well, that's another
my
way to do it.
parameters.
Yeah. Okay.
What about
Okay.
liability insurance? I know back in the day, there was no coverage for supervisors for liability insurance, but now I see on CPH where not only supervisors are covered now, but coaches are covered, and I believe consultants. So, was I seeing that wrong, or is
No,
it
we're covered.
now?
We're covered. They can put it on their it's like $8 or something on CPH for them.
Now it is, but years ago it wasn't.
Right.
We did not have coverage for supervision, but I think I've seen that recently through the advent of telehealth in this way, that I've seen it in the last 2 years, where now supervisors are covered for their supervisors, supervisees.
Tracy, you're not finding it, and I'm also noticing that in the verification form, it used to say that did the MFT do 750 hours of relational. It no longer says that, and because of that, I've had people who said, "Oh, does that mean I don't have to do that?" I said, "No, you still have to do that." But you'll notice in the
Still have to do
verification, it says in compliance with, and it gives the statute. So Tracy, if you pull up the statute's connected to that in the verification form, see if it says it there. That would be my next place to look. Yeah.
The attestation form.
Yeah, they actually call it verification now. They changed
right.
the name. So yeah, I wish they didn't have the I wish they had the 750 still in there, but at least they put the statute in there. But boy, they change things and everybody thinks it's free for all.
But just to be clear, right, Els, you have to have 750 for
absolutely. It says it in the statute.
Yeah.
It's half of, I think, or
50% must be related.
50%.
Yes.
I got some kickback on that. And Michael and I discussed it. We found it.
No, it's
But
absolutely
we still
there.
got pushback on. I still got some pushback.
Oh
on it,
yeah. Well, you get pushback on people wanting to do private practice from home as a registered intern. So yeah, I was going to say, so you're making an office in your home for the supervisor or the licensed person? So
Are you serving coffee when they sit at your dining room table?
Exactly.
If I looked up the statute, it's not there, and it does not have a relational on there either. And I'm not trying to push it.
No. I know it's there. We just got to find it.
Yeah. And I bring it up because I've had supervisors bring it up to me, because I also used to make supervisees do that 1 to 15 hours.
Now that's gone away.
Changed.
Right.
That's gone away. Yeah.
I used to do that, and that's when I saw that some of these changes were happening. So just bring it up.
No, you're absolutely.
So if you find it, please.
I agree with you. I'll have to hunt it
do
down.
that.
Yeah, I'll have to hunt it down for sure.
Thank you.
Well, knowing that we're down to our last six. Yes, Janet.
Excuse me, you said that the 1 to 15 has changed. What has it changed to?
So so what it's changed to is that at the end of the no less than 2 years, they have to have 1,500 hours of direct contact and 100 hours of supervision, but it no longer has to march together of 15 and 1, 15 and 1. Right.
But
So
it does have to be every other week.
Yes.
It does.
At least
1 hour.
every other
Yeah, at least
Yeah.
once a month. It's like weird. Like
No, it's not once a month. It's
No, at least
you were
twice
correct,
a
Tracy.
month.
It's a 1 hour every 2 weeks, unless
Right.
you're doing supervision for provisional license, which you're going to find more of, because when a bunch of people didn't get licensed after 5 years, one of the options that they had is that they could apply for provisional license, which gives them 2 more years to finish taking the exam, but they have to have an hour every month under provisional license. Yeah.
It was 2 years. I thought it was 1 year. Oh, okay.
Provisional's 2.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we never heard of, who ever heard of any provisional licenses until now? So yeah.
For our 50% rule, it's 491.005. Section 2, which is with
Could you
parentheses.
put it in the chat?
Oh, well, it's one of those things. I can give it to you and then you can find it. Hold on.
Oh, good point. All right.
Because you have to go back and forth to figure out what the citation is.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll put it in the chat.
I'm going to guess that the 750 is in there as well, or the 50%.
50%.
Yeah. But Tracy, you were also asking about the of 100, okay, completed at least 2 years of clinical during which 50% of the applicant's hours, right? So so that's the language. If you could, if you're able to put in what the actual statute number is, then that would be great.
Oh, you're gonna make this difficult, but I will.
I know. Well, Tracy can just come to our laws and rules class. That would solve that problem.
Yeah, and it's interesting, the language, it is interesting, the wording in the language there to me, Michael, that
Yeah, because you could be seeing them individually doing.
We're receiving marriage and family therapy services.
Exactly.
And so systemically, we can do that with one person in the room who's coming about their marriage, you know, but that's not the intent of it, I don't think. But
Correct.
the language is interesting, yeah.
Tracy, you were about to say something.
Saying this something similar, what qualifies as marriage and family therapy services, because it was very, very clear before, like it had to be related, whereas now it's not. So I think that kind of, yeah.
Well, I think some
of course it's not recorded on the form, so.
Right, you no longer say.
I thought it was clear though, because for instance, I think mine says something like 50% face-to-face must include the following categories in cases: unmarried dyads, married couples, separating and divorcing couples, and family groups, including children. 49105.
Are you looking at the verification form?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, it's in the statute, but you're right, Tracy. It's no longer the verification form makes it seem as if they only need 1,500, that there's no requirement. And it no longer asks you to break out how many individual and how many group supervision hours. Whereas a lot of states do require all of that.
I still do that.
Yeah, I think I was going to say, I think what changed happened about years ago with the board when I used to attend all the board meetings. And I remember distinctly it was in Jacksonville when this board meeting happened. And I was in the audience, and they licensed somebody from another state who did not meet the exact Florida requirements, but who had some years of experience. Because as you remember, for years and years and years, people would move to Florida who probably should have been licensed, but they were not able to get licensed because of how distinct our laws and rules were that the board followed. But the board actually voted and said, well, it sounds good to us, and they accepted this person. And I remember during the break in the board meeting, and I went up to talk to the chair of the board and the attorney, and I said, are y'all writing legislation of your own now? What's going on? And they said, we've been asking for years for things to change. They haven't changed. We're just going to start changing it. And so I think that's when some of these things began to happen, because the board is not well funded, because the legislature keeps sweeping the money every year that we pay for our annual biannual renewals. They keep taking a lot of that money. So the board is not well funded, and they have basically the same number of staff as they had 20 or 30 years ago, when there was just a small number of 491 licensees, and today we have 30,000 probably, you know.
Yep. Christy.
Is it still the case that a registered intern can only have 2 supervisors? Because one of my supervisors
At any one time.
At any one time.
At any one time. They can have lots of them, but they can only have 2 at any one time.
Okay, that's great. So when they're finished, because they spend 2 years with me in our MFT clinic, and then they go on for internship, and most of them go to an external site. So at that point, I can just have them transfer to another supervisor.
Yep. And here's where the law is very specific, and the board is very sticky about this, is that they cannot count any hours with the new supervisor until that has been all approved and they received the email back saying that that the new supervisor is approved to supervise them.
Okay.
So yeah, that's really important that they make a clean change. Yeah.
And they're taking a very long time right now.
They are, but they, sickness and short-staffed and working from home, and yeah, there was a while there they were doing nothing for 491 because they were too busy licensing nurses to get them on the hospital floors. So yeah, it's still pretty tight up there. And as Larry just said, they're basically short-staffed.
What kind of time frame are we talking these days?
Month?
At least a month.
More than that. I've
More
had
than a month.
nurses
It's been like 3 or 4
for
months.
2 to 3 months. Yeah.
And what about applications?
Wow.
Applications are quicker than.
They're quicker, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I do is I send an email nagging, and then they tend to turn it around right away.
Yeah, but
I've sent those nagging ones. Still nothing.
supervisor approvals though are taking a while now.
Tell him Schooley said. No, that's not true.
I was
but-
gonna say I'm gonna CC Schooley.
Okay, or Ashley Irving is the new executive director.
It's worth a call. I called when one of my interns was over 3 months, and I called and they did it while I was on the phone.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, somebody
So
had
squeaky
died.
wheel.
I haven't,
Oh.
there was an actual person there that died. And so they were all uptaking her work.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so basically the only way my intern got done was because I called and they just said, she's like, I'm not getting off the phone with you. If I get off the phone with you, your intern won't get approved.
Okay. I like it.
Okay.
I like it. So this is another thing as supervisors that we can advocate for our interns, our trainees to do those kind of follow-ups when they've done everything they know how. Yeah, for sure. Okay.
And it's not just in Florida that those things are true. They had, during the pandemic, they had one staff with their regulatory board that was doing all healthcare professions, one person. So it was taking 6 to 9 months for people to get things through the New York board.
Wow.
Yeah. And in North Carolina, you cannot practice at all until you are an affiliate or associate license. And that not only requires passing the exam first, but you have to wait till the next board meeting in order for that to be approved. So yeah. So in the grand scheme of things, compared to other states, we're probably at par or a little better. Probably. Yeah. Well, I am really conscious of the time here, and there are several major areas that we did not discuss that we are required to do. So let me mention them. One of which is on effective supervision models. And some of the models I'd like you to think about, there's the clinical models, right? Some of you supervise from a Bowen perspective or a solution focused perspective or whatever. There's also developmental models. So you can think about in terms of where they are in their development on various things, where are they developmentally on diagnosing, on case note writing, on joining skills, intervening skills, assessment skills, right? So you can look at it developmentally as a model in terms of that. One of the things that you received was a piece on common factors in supervision, and there's a Sprinkle article that you can read about that's very good, but they talk about basically 3 continua of are you more on the clinical or more on the professional? Any given time, is your focus on competence clinically or somewhere professionally or somewhere in the middle? When you're looking at your relationship with the intern, are you more collaborative or are you more directive? And of course, that will change on the topic, right? And then in terms of specificity, are you talking very, very particularly about a case, or are you talking more generally? And again, this is all on a continuum. So if you think of those 3 ways of competence, relationship, and specificity, these were the common factors that Sprinkle found in the literature about good supervision. And then the big topic we did not mention in any way was the issue of cultural diversity. And we could do another 3 hours on just cultural diversity. I would like to direct you to some Ken Hardy sources. He has got a couple of different things out there now on the culturally competent supervisor. There's a new systemic supervisor book out that talks about cultural competence, how we not only think about what is the clinician and the family doing around cultural competence, but what's happening between you and the trainee around cultural competence. Not only are you culturally competent for the clients they're working with, but what's happening in your relationship with them, given differences in race, gender, and all the rest, all the other descriptors. And so this is an area that is being talked about a great deal in the literature. I know that it comes up a lot for the AMFT approved training. So good resources out there. I encourage you to go look at them. I encourage you to talk with your trainees about issues of diversity. I'm certain all of you are doing that clinically. I can't imagine that you wouldn't be, but it's also to talk about in terms of your own relationship with the interns themselves and that relationship. What will happen is that we will be sending to you an evaluation by email. Upon returning that to me, I can issue you your certificate, but we will also be entering your CEs into the CE broker. I've collected everybody's license. I have them. Oh, no, I don't have Tracy's. So Tracy, if you'll stay a second, I'll get that from you. And so that we can enter that for you once I get the evaluation back. Any last words in the couple of minutes that we have? Yes, Charmaine.
If you're dual license, you were for both, well, you both are CE broker, so.
Yeah, you just have to do it once.
Okay.
Yep, yep. Right, any other questions or thoughts? Was this worth the time on a
very riveting?
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you so much.
It's great.
Good. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
All right.
Very
Well,
interactive.
good.
It was great meeting everybody and seeing everyone again.
Yeah.
It is.
And I hope to see some of you at the other license renewal workshops where we're doing one on Stacy is doing one on ethical and medical error prevention, medical errors.
No, ethics and boundaries.
Ethics and boundaries, right? Somebody, Larry's going to do that on prevention of medical errors. We have someone who will be doing domestic violence, and I'll be doing the laws and rules refresher for everybody that has to have that every 6 years. So go into CE Broker, check your transcript, figure out what you don't have, and check to see if we are offering it. It was just great to have so many people tonight. So thank you.
When you communicate with Annalyn, ask her about the laws and rules and the domestic violence and HIV/AIDS for interns that we're offering on October 16th and 17th. So we won't solicit you now, but she'll send you the flyer.
Yes.
I already sent my flyer out to my folks. So.
Excellent.
Yeah, I already have interns registered for it. I know.
Excellent. Excellent. Yes. Yes. All right, everyone.
Will you guys ever do like Friday